Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Underground eCommerce Brand Blitz podcast, where we delve into the world of e-commerce, really, and DTC, and bring you exclusive insights from some of the minds from different niches, different businesses. And I'm your host, Alistair. And today we have a very special guest who's been on a remarkable journey. I'm really excited to hear about this. So, hi there, Johnpaul. How are you?
Hey, Alistair. Yeah, all good. Um, Great to be here. Thanks for having
That's
me.
good. Well, thanks for joining us today, John Paul. John Paul is the visionary founder of a couple of companies, actually. So, John Paul, can you explain some of the companies that you're actually managing at the moment?
Yeah, so we have two companies geographically placed in two different locations. So we have our UK company, which owns four websites, which is installation4less.co.uk. Then we have build for less, and we have tiles for less, and then we also have building supplies online, which also abbreviates to bso.co.uk. But I also own a company in the US, and on that we have two websites, installationforus.com and roofingforus.com.
Right. Okay. That's well. Thanks for explaining that. You're definitely carving out a unique niche in the market. I can see, and you've definitely navigated yourself quite well, um, especially in this ever evolving world of e-commerce as well. So I'm really determined to hear how it's been for you. So to start off with, Jean Paul, how did it all start from zero?
Um, so my original background, I'm a carpenter by trade. So I served my time in Ireland as a carpenter. And then I went on into the construction industry with my brother Darrell, and then my other brother Keith came into the business then at a later stage. But we started off just doing extensions, one-off houses here and there around Dublin and Wicklow, and some down in Cavan in Ireland as well. And yeah, it was just kind of we'd buy a site, we'd get planning on it, and we'd build a house. And the business eventually grew into two houses, then a site for six houses, then a site for 12. Then we were up to 30 houses, and then we bought another site, and there was 100 plus houses on it. So at any given time, towards the end of the boom, if you want, in 2008, I think it would have been. Um, we would have had two or three sites running with maybe 150 houses in total being built at any one time. So obviously then in 2006, 2007, the crash hit the construction industry. But before that, I kind of always had in my head that I wanted to bring the construction industry online in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but it was always sitting at the back of my head when I was running these sites. How do I bring this online type scenario? So then I decided as the downturn hit, I had to effectively reinvent myself because our construction business effectively just stopped. There was nobody buying houses. Banks would no longer release money to continue the construction. So I decided to set up a comparison website for construction materials because we were such big builders at the time. We had got fairly substantial buying power. So I knew that with our buying power, we'd be able to leverage that against kind of smaller builders and DIYers, whereby I'd be able to continue to keep buying at those prices, but at the same time pass on the saving onto smaller contractors. And this worked quite well during the crash because a lot of contractors could no longer get credit accounts because they defaulted, right? I mean, they weren't able to pay their
Right.
suppliers, but they had small jobs that they wanted to do and were able to do, but they couldn't get credit. Suppliers wouldn't supply them because you needed to pay your credit, and they couldn't be seen to supply the contractors. So the contractors now come to me, buy the or kind of use my website as a comparison site, and then buy through us. And that model worked to to an extent, but there were some flaws because we were so early to the market with a comparison site in 2007. The technology wasn't there to really be able to secure your customers, and there was a lot of go to build for less, get your prices, have suppliers price products in on the website. But then they were circumventing us and going straight to the supplier, and then the supplier would deal direct with them, and we were losing our cut, and we weren't actually making any money out of the site. So then I completely reinvented the site pure e-commerce play, which was right then, if you guys are going to go around me, I'm just going to go straight through you effectively, where you have to buy the product off us to make the saving. Otherwise, if you walk into a local builder's merchant, you won't get them prices. So that's where the e-commerce play came from. We were just too early with a comparison site. We were actually one of the first comparison sites to ever launch. Um, but we were just too early. So that's where the e-commerce play came in, and I set up buildforless.ie, pure e-commerce, and we started to sell to contractors. And it worked quite well because the contractors could buy from us. We would then pass the order on to the supplier. Supplier would then effectively be seen to supply us, but they knew they were supplying these other contractors that owed them money. But you see, we were paying the suppliers. So it kind of kept an awful lot of small jobs and small contractors going because they could buy through us now instead of going to their supplier and their supplier going, no, we're not going to supply you until you pay us. So um, that went very well. And then I decided to set up in the UK. And that's when I set up Insulation for Less Code UK. And we decided to do a pure insulation play because I went into business with two other guys from Ireland that were in the insulation industry. And we decided we'd go niche, that um, uh, the niche offering was probably better than going with the full building product solution that we had in Ireland. Apart from the setup process that would be required to kind of upload 100,000 products, um, where insulation was an easier route to market as such.
Was that
So we built the insulation side out, and that went quite well in the UK. And that's when I actually decided to go at it in the US as well. So I actually set up the US quite close in around the same time as the UK. And the US kind of took a different run because my initial run at the US was a failure. And that didn't work. And it took me 2 years to figure that out. But I just decided to park it. I think it was probably between 2012 to around 2016 or so. I just parked the US. I just didn't do anything with it. I left it there. But I knew I was going to go back at some point. But I just needed to get the UK where it was and not be distracted with the UK or with the US. So I focused on the UK business then for a number of years, and then I relaunched in the US in 2016, which has, thank God, I took learnings from the UK and I applied them then to the US, and that worked very well.
very
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of continued from there on. After Insulation for Less, we decided that we would move on then into the broader building product sector.
right?
Um, and that's where buildforless.co.uk came into play. So we started to move into the more general building materials. Um, and I think that would have been in around 2019 or so, in around that time frame when we launched buildforless.co.uk, 2018, 2019. Um, and then we acquired another business then called BSO, Building Supplies Online. So that was another play in relation to expanding our reach and expanding our customer base in the UK. So that company ran into difficulties and went into liquidation, and then we acquired their online
Right.
assets. And that's continued to grow over time. So that's building supplies online.co.uk. Slightly different offering to
What's the
to
website again? Building
buildforless.co.uk.
supplies.
Building supplies online.co.uk, or there's an abbreviation which is
Ah,
bso.co.uk.
yes. Okay. Oh, yeah, I see that now. Right. Yeah, I'm just
Mm,
looking at all your websites here. It's really interesting. I like how you've got your, especially with the insulation for less and tiles for less, you've got that logo, with the house,
mm.
with the number four, which is quite cool. So I guess,
Yeah.
building a brand in the e-commerce space actually requires, a very unique approach, especially if it comes to your niche as well. Could you share some of the insights on how you managed to create a brand identity, like in the UK, that resonates with your target audience?
Yeah, so actually, our brand at the early stages, because we were so early into e-commerce, the For Less brand, if you
Yeah.
like, caused a little bit of rejection in the market because it was deemed that we were less, right? So that we would always be selling less and disrupting the market too much with regards to price. And there was certain pushback from manufacturers, from distributors, because ultimately we were so early into the e-commerce realm that a lot of manufacturers and distributors didn't understand e-commerce. They weren't even thinking of e-commerce. And who's this lad from Ireland coming over here and opening up accounts and trying to use this for less brand, and undermine our customers, etc. So there was a huge amount of a learning curve that manufacturers and distributors in the UK needed to overcome because we were one of the first into the e-commerce market in the construction industry in the UK. So we effectively paved the way for all other e-commerce brands in the construction industry ultimately because they ride at our coattails because we done all the hard work convincing manufacturers to deal with us, convincing distributors it was a good idea to deal with us.
Right.
So anyone that came behind, it was like, oh yeah, we've done this before. So yeah, no problem, we'll work with you. So we paved the way, and the For Less brand at the early stages, as I was saying, was kind of seen as a as us diluting the market, but it was ultimately how our approach or how we worked with our manufacturers, our customers, our distributors to prove to them that we're actually a partner and we're here to work with you. And that all helped to define the brand as to what it is today with Build for
Right.
Less, insulation for less, and tiles for less. That now we're not deemed as or not looked upon by manufacturers or distributors as a cheap
Right.
brand, but more as a premium brand now because of what we've carved out in the market and our relationships with our suppliers and manufacturers.
I've seen that on your roofing website in the US, you don't use the For Less brand. Was there any particular reason?
Right. Um, So Build for Less was taken in the
Ah,
US. So
yeah,
buildforless.com
makes
was
sense.
gone. But also, I didn't want to cause too much confusion, right? So if you have insulationforless.co.uk and then you have
Yeah.
insulationforless.com, you could have customers from the UK landing on the US site and vice versa, and they wouldn't know where they're going.
Right.
So to differentiate the brands, we kept the four, but the US side was just to differentiate it really from the
Yeah.
UK. We just felt it was better to do that.
I'm just curious. I'm not familiar with this niche in terms of digital marketing. So, could you highlight some of the most impactful digital marketing tactics that have contributed to your company's growth?
Yeah. I suppose digital marketing is an interesting one because there's so many facets to digital marketing. And ultimately, there's no silver bullet that you can say, oh, do this and you're going to be a success, right? So it's kind of like a holistic approach. You have to look at all the different opportunities that are there, all the different technologies in the market, and see what works best. A/B test as much as possible. I mean, obviously, you're going to use your Google Ads and the various tools within there, and then your social media marketing, and the various tools that they offer as well. But the downside, I suppose, to using too many tools is you're going to spread yourself very thin. So figuring out what works best as early as possible is very, very important, but also understanding what you're looking at is very important in all these different dashboards because all these different companies, whether it's Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, all these companies will take credit for sales that come onto your website in one way or another. And unless you're actually able to filter out the noise as to no, actually, TikTok, you didn't generate that sale. That came from Google Ads or that came from Facebook. And then you have Facebook saying that they're taking Google Ads sales, etc., etc. So there's a huge amount of work involved in filtering all that information out
Right.
and finding out what works and what doesn't work. That's vitally
You
important.
highlighted briefly earlier on some of those moments that really changed your business, let's say. What would you say is that one pivotal moment that really took your companies or your company to the next level? What would you say was that moment in an e-commerce sense, let's say?
Um, I suppose you could say COVID really kind of turned things around an awful lot from from the aspect of people realizing e-commerce is here and here to stay, right? I mean, you'll hear a lot of people talk about, oh, when e-commerce or when COVID hit, we got a boost in traffic and we got a boost in revenue. But what you also don't hear is that once COVID started to fade away, their traffic dropped back and they weren't able to maintain it. Right. So, I mean, everyone got this boost during COVID. We were lucky enough that we were able to maintain it. But I think the main game changer was that everyone realized that if e-commerce wasn't around when COVID hit, the world would have been in a way worse place financially because e-commerce kept things going. It allowed people to buy their groceries. It allowed people to buy what they needed from if they want to do DIY work at home. It allowed people buy their clothes, even buy their dog food, right? So everybody was online. Manufacturers and distributors and everybody else that was involved in the making of products and selling products realized that they have to go online. And all of a sudden, e-commerce became very important in their eyes. So we've seen a huge shift, more so even in the US, where we've seen a huge shift in mentality from not wanting to deal with anybody in e-commerce, that we have to deal with bricks and mortar only, and unless you have a store, we don't want to talk to you, to now all of a sudden them calling us and going, can we set up an account with you? And as I said, it was a big shift in the US, and for years, I would have been banging on doors for manufacturers to deal with us, and they'd no interest whatsoever. After COVID, they're calling me looking to set up
Right.
accounts. You know.
Okay. One thing I've realized, John Paul, is that you are very well rated on all your sites. So obviously the customer experience is prime to you. Could you give us a little bit of a highlight of what that looks like for your customers from the moment they land on your website, purchase their products, and then obviously, use it, in their homes and whatnot?
Yeah, so I suppose our approach really is to delight our customer as much as we possibly can, and part of that is communication. I think if you're providing good, clear communication to your customers through the journey, um, and then delivering on your promise, right? So, if you can do that, I think that's probably 90% of of what customers expect. So I mean, we offer obviously a customer can pick up the phone, they can call us, and we have a sales team there and customer service team ready to take their calls. We also have live chat, which is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can go on to live chat at any time and talk to somebody, and it's not a robot; it's a real
Wow.
person.
Impressive.
And that's 365 days a year. It's never down. And then obviously your email support. So uh, I think from a customer's point of view, to be able to either email or pick up the phone and ring or go on to live chat and actually talk to
Yes.
somebody, that's a huge
Yeah.
help, and you know that your issue or query is going to be dealt with quite quickly. Now, look, like all things, there are times when you can't deal with certain queries or issues straight away because there's probably a little bit of work in behind dealing with them. But I'd say 95% of the queries that come into us, we're able to change out orders, change delivery dates, special requests from customers. If you can fulfill those requests and do it quickly,
Yeah.
that's great for the customer. But then also transparency on the website. I think transparency on the website around when the customer can expect to get their product and what the product is and the information around the
Right.
product. And that's not easy done. I mean, there's a lot of work involved to do that. But I think that's very, very important.
Well, that's interesting. Especially these days, you've got all kinds of technology platforms coming in, AI and whatnot, bots, robots everywhere, dealing with customers, and you see a growing frustration with people. So it's refreshing to see that a brand like yours is able to deploy, that sort of service, and talking with real people. I think this is really a point that a lot of brands have to be careful about. So I'm really glad you gave us the insight on that. That a real person does make a big difference when it comes to business,
Yes.
right? So looking at one thing, I was looking at your website and I was thinking the logistics side of things. I guess that must have been so crucial for your business, because it can make or break any business. Obviously, e-commerce. What did you do to really optimize your supply chain, especially during COVID?
Oh, COVID was a nightmare. All right. So, like, I mean, ultimately, I think everybody during COVID was kind of winging it to a certain extent, because there were so many supply chain issues. There were so many manufacturers either closing or staying open, but only at a very, very small scale. So supply during COVID was a massive challenge. I think everybody will agree with that. And actually, surprisingly enough, we used to find an awful lot of customers, no matter how much you try to explain to them that there's an issue with the manufacturer, they would just go, "Oh, another COVID excuse." But I mean, it was very difficult to manage, and I suppose for us, we were constantly changing on our website when you can expect to get something, and like it could even be a case that because we're dropship, right? We don't hold stock, so I mean that's just one thing we don't do. So all our orders come direct from the manufacturers or certain distribution warehouses. So in some cases, we could have placed an order with a warehouse or a manufacturer, and they'd confirm the order, and they'd go, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're not going to be able to deliver this for 9 weeks." You know, where like yesterday it was 3 days, you know. So that was a big issue. But ultimately, I mean, you have to try and tread water there as best you can and try to keep customers informed, offer them refunds if if they wanted refunds or if they were happy to wait until the product came into stock. So there was a lot of management in that process. But also from from an overall point of view, if we're to take normal times into consideration where things have effectively gone back to normal, there is still some little things here and there that cause issues with supply. But ultimately, um, working with your partners is the most important part of getting your supply chain right. And one thing that we kind of say to our partners is that we're not looking to change your processes. I mean, I never go to a partner and say, this is what we want and this is what you're going to do, right? I go to them and we go, this is how we work. How do you work? How can we fit into your existing processes that will work for us and will work for our
Perfect.
customers? So instead of trying to change a company, we
Right.
change and we work to the way they work. And that's what makes the delivery process work well, because we're not trying to reinvent how a manufacturer does their processes. We already work with their processes. And by doing that, we know that we've a better chance of fulfilling our orders on time because we know that's their normal time frame in which they can fulfill their orders.
That's a huge insight when it comes to logistics from your side. That's really really useful for the listeners out there. Normally, at this stage, I'm asking, what trends you see in shaping the future. But I think what I'd like to ask you is, for somebody, I'm sure you don't want any competition in your market there, but for say somebody elsewhere in the world, if they were looking to launch their own DTC brand, not in this niche, but in any niche, what would be one of the, I would say, one sentence you would say that was really crucial for you that you would give advice to?
Stick with
Yeah,
it.
you can think about that. We have time.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that stick with it. So for quite some time, people had said to me, "Oh, Johnpaul, that's not working. Go get a job." And I said, "No, it'll work. It'll come right." Because I believed e-commerce was the future. So I stuck with it. And even when the US was losing money year after year after year, I stuck with it. It became profitable. If you're prepared to put in the hours and put in the hard work and learn, it'll become a success. But you also got to be very careful with success and what success looks like. Does that success require you to bring in investment, or does that success require you to actually just knuckle down and do it yourself? Because they're two completely different stories, right? So you bring in investment, and it's how quickly you can blow that money to acquire new customers, right? But there's the downside to that, because if you don't get traction you need as quickly as your investors want them to be, well, then the investors are going to be looking for their money back, and they're going to be looking to get out. And what does that do? That applies pressure to you, pressure that you don't need, financial pressure, which is one of the worst pressures you can experience, is financial pressure. And then there's the other side of the coin. Do you do it yourself? Do you do it without bringing in external investment? And that's something that we did. We never brought investment into the business in the UK nor in the US. We done it all ourselves. That has its challenges as well, because you have a slower growth curve, but we always keep our P&L in the green, right? So, I mean, we're never in the red. So, and a red P&L means you're going to be under pressure, and then you make harsh decisions, and sometimes you make wrong decisions. So, I think ultimately, it kind of boils down to what route you want to take. Do you want quick success with a higher chance of failure, or do you want a slower success curve with less chance of failure? So, they're questions you need to ask yourself, but you don't always have to go out to the market to seek investment. And I think a lot of people that are involved with startups, first thing that goes through their head is, where can I get money for investment?
Exactly.
You're diluting your company, you're putting yourself under pressure. And by God, when those investors put money into your business, and the VCs, they will work you to the bone, and they will get every dime out of you, blood, sweat, and tears. And if it doesn't work, they will pull the plug on you so fast you won't know what hit you.
Wow. Well, there you have it, folks. Johnpaul with his insights are just amazing. I mean, I've really enjoyed listening to you. Normally, I'm the one who's talking a lot on these podcasts, but I just really enjoyed listening to you, and the exclusive look into the world of your businesses. The visionary behind it, John Paul. Your insights have been incredible, and I'm sure they're very valuable for the listeners as well. Looking to the dynamic world of e-commerce that you've experienced. And to our listeners, make sure you visit our website. You will see the podcast there. You will see, obviously, some of the other podcasts that we have there. But I think, Jean Paul, your insights have been really valuable to everybody, and you're a real standout player in the industry there. I can see that. And remember, for more exciting discussions on e commerce strategy, stay tuned to Brand Blitz. We're always happy to bring you some of the amazing insights like you just heard from John Paul. So John Paul, thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks, Alistair.
Right.
Pleasure.